You should see my outline here for the webinar here today, just a quick little overview. We're going to start with just a quick tour, a quick takeoff, just so you see the main parts of how the program fits the main pieces together. Then we're going to step back a little bit and show you a few of the essential things you need to know in the setup part of the program. And then we'll jump in and do a little more detailed takeoff, take you through some of the more commonly used takeoff parts of the program, and then we'll finish by running some of the reports, doing the number crunching. So we'll get started here. This is the screen you see when you open up the Electrical Bid Manager program. And right now you're looking at the program basically as it comes off the shelf. So I'm going to create a new job by hitting new. Just going to call this. So I'm going to hit OK here. And we're just going to go take off a few receptacles, a little bit of wiring for them, and then do the reports. So down here on the left where it says Fixtures and Devices Takeoff, we're going to go to Device Assemblies. And there's a folder here for receptacles, flush, wood or metal stud. You're going to drill down in the next level to duplex. And then the first one under 20 amps, a 20 amp spec grade with a plastic plate. We're going to put in 25 of those. And then we're going to do those in MC cables. So up at the top here, we're going to go to wire and conduit takeoff. Come down to cable. It's already set up for 12.2, so I'm going to put in 20 feet per outlet. That'll be a total of 500 feet, 25 runs, and we'll hit takeoff here. So to do the number crunching, on the lower left, you come down to reports, go to job extension, and we're just going to hit extension spreadsheet. Again, we'll talk about some of the selections and options there. There we go. So I've got a total of $401 in material and a little over almost 26 hours of labor. To put that into a final bid price, you just go to job totals. There's my material total at the top with tax, my labor with the hourly rate multiplied by the hours, and then we're just going to come down here to overhead. We'll put 15%. Right below that, we'll click on profit and put in 10. So one of the misconceptions I like to immediately put out of the on the table there is that putting little jobs into the program is not worth it sometimes. I think it's just the opposite. The amount of number crunching you do on a small job versus a large job is proportionally much higher on a small job. You still got to run the reports. You still got to do the pricing and labor. So on a small job, percentage-wise, you actually save more time. I think that was, what, 3 or 4 minutes? And we got a $1,500 bid with itemized material pricing and labor units. So that's the overall flow. You set up the job, you do the takeoff, you run the reports. Now, before we go on, I'm going to tell you about a couple things in the setup. Under settings, under the user maintenance, this is where you set up each user. I've only got myself set up plus the default setup of a supervisor. And I'm going to change my setup to be back to not being a pro user, so you're going to see the program in the plus mode. So for those of you that have the standard version or the plus version, it's going to look just like that. There'll be a few things that are missing from the pro version. So I'm going to log out and log back in. Okay, the important part of the setup, you can see it's running a price update now from Epic. Epic is our pricing program. You're going to see a little bit of a example with Epic a little bit later. Epic does 2 things. It updates your prices, which you just saw happen. It also gives you the availability. You're bringing in additional items into a bid. They're items that aren't in your typical normal database. So under settings again, this time we're going to go to the program settings. And on the company tab, make sure you've got your company name and address filled in, because the company name prints on all the reports. The other information here prints on a number of the reports, including the form letters. So if you're going to use the program to generate a proposal or even a cover letter for a change order, this is where it gets the information for those form letters. And then finally, under settings, under default settings for job and commercial, this is where you set up your defaults so that every time you open up a brand new job, You don't have to change things that are typically the same, like your sales tax rates, your labor rates. You can always adjust them or make other selections when they're in the job, but the idea here is you set the defaults, so when you jump in and start a job, you don't have to worry about that for the most part. Under job allocation, the second row of tabs is sales tax. You want to set that to your local rate, whatever you're paying when you buy your materials at your wholesaler. And then back under job settings, over to the right, you'll see a tab for extensions. And then the first selection there is direct labor rates. This is where you set up your typical crew. Now you can have more than one. You can see there's 3 samples here. The default is this setup of half journeymen, half helpers. So that's why the labor or the hours are set to 50% of each. The base rate should represent the average rate that they see for that category on their paycheck. So that's the 28 here. Now that's just an example. Don't take that as any kind of a general average for the nation, because it's different everywhere. It can be different from your competition across the street. So you need to individualize this and take a look at it. The burden is the one that's hard to calculate. That adds in the employer's portion of payroll taxes, federal and state, with the exception of the few states that don't have state payroll taxes. It should include workers' comp, it should include general liability insurance, and it should include all benefits. So that could be everything from sick pay, vacation pay, holiday pay, if any or part or all of the health insurance is paid by the employer, that would be included here. So that's not an easy number just to pull off the top of your head. You want to take some time to look at that with your bookkeeper or accountant just to make sure you've got an accurate number in here. You can put it in as a dollar amount or percentage. These 2 columns are connected. So that might help you a little bit too. So with these numbers in the example, my composite rate is this number down here at the bottom, the 3105. So I'm going to hit OK. Not going to change the numbers for now. Going to hit OK again. Okay, so that is pretty much the basics of the setup. Okay, so I'm going to go up here to Job File and hit New. So the main thing I want you to come out of this webinar with is just a good overview of how the basic parts of the system fit together. You are going to see a few little shortcuts and things like that, but the idea of this webinar is basic. So under Job File, you just hit New. And we give the job a name. Now that is the only thing you have to do on this screen. The bid due date is important to the price updating, whether you're using Epic to update your prices or whether you're doing it manually. If you wanted to manually update your prices, anything that you change before the bid due date, I set it to a week from today, will automatically be reflected in the job if you run the reports again. And then on the 23rd, it's going to freeze the prices. Now you can always come back to an old job if it's put on hold or delayed and update the prices, but unless you tell it to update the prices, they're going to be frozen on the 23rd. I'm just going to hit OK here. Now you'll see once the job is created, you'll always see the job name up at the very top of the screen in this header. So there's the job name and the job number. If I want to go back to that setup screen, I just go to Settings and go to Job Settings and hit Job Info. I'm going to put the square footage over here at the right. So at the end, I'm going to be able to see the cost per foot before and after my markup. Okay, so all of the takeoff groups are down here: wire and conduit, distribution, fixtures, and other. Others, everything that's not in the first 3. So if I'm going to take off a receptacle, again, I go to Fixtures and Devices, go to Device Assemblies. I like to maximize this window just so it fills it out a little better. And again, we're going to go to Receptacles, Flush, and Wood or Metal Stud. Going to go to Duplex. So we're just drilling down through these folders. And here's a 20 amp spec grade. Now there's also premium grade. Premium is more of an industrial grade. I'm going to put in 100 receptacles and hit OK. So down there in the lower part of the screen, you'll see what we call the audit trail. The audit trail shows you what was entered in the order that it was entered. So it lets you verify that you got the right materials. And it's also going to tell you where you left off, because every new entry gets added to the audit trail. The last thing in the audit trail is the last thing you entered. And finally, it's also where we go to make changes. little bit later, I'll show you if you need to make a change. You can delete an entry. You can change the quantity of the entry. You can even change what's in the entry, in the assembly. Most of what we're going to do here today is assemblies, but we'll take off a few individual items a little bit later. So to take off a GFI receptacle, we just go back once. Next folder down is GFI. And again, we're going to go to 20 amp spec grade and a plastic plate. I'm going to enter 10 of those. To do a quad or a double duplex, we'll go back once. We'll go to quad, 20 amp spec grade and a plastic plate, and we'll put in 20 of those. For a switch assembly, this time I'm going to hit the back button twice. Come down here to switches, flush, and wood and metal stud. The first folder is single gang, single pole switches. And we'll stay with the 20 amp spec grade and a plastic plate. I'm going to enter 20 of those. For a three-way switch, you just go back once. One gang, one three-way, 20 amp spec grade. I'm going to put in 10 of those. And just one more, and I'm going to throw a little curve into the presentation here. We're going to go to two gang with two single poles, 20 amp spec grade, put in 10 of those. So what if we need a 3-gang assembly? I'm going to scroll down here a little ways. You'll see starting right here, there's all the way down to here. There's about 1, 2, 3, 4, about 8 folders that have 3 switches. But as you probably could quickly figure out that there's not every combination here. If I needed a single pole, a 3-way, and a dimmer, I'm not going to find that combination. So the way we handle that is this module on the left. It's called Custom Assemblies. So the idea here is that you can start with just a basic configuration and change it. You could build it from scratch, but that would be the hard way. This button called Saved Assemblies, which you're going to see several times in the webinar here today, is a good way to begin your assembly here. We're going to double click on select a 3-gang switch outlet. Going to change it to one switch here, one single pole switch. On the next line, when I hit device, it brings up the folder with all the devices. So we go to switches, 20 amp 3-way, spec grade, I'll put in one of those. And then the third device is going to be a dimmer. So I'm going to go down to incandescent and LED. And you'll see everything from your basic rotary dimmers down to Lutron, Diva, and Maestro dimmers. But right here is a 600 watt single pole spec grade slide dimmer. I'm going to put in one of those. So I just built a brand new assembly. It was a few extra clicks, obviously, but you have unlimited flexibility in this screen. Now I'm going to put in 2 for the quantity and hit F2 takeoff. Now, if I do want to save that assembly, all you do is go back to where we started with Saved Assemblies. On the right side of this little window, you hit Save Screen, and you give it a name. Now, when you name things here, it's really up to you as to what you call it. As long as you know what it is, that's all that's critical. Now, once I hit OK, you'll see it adds it to the program. It adds it to the list. Now it's in the system. It'll be here from now on, whether I'm in this job or another job. Now, I'm going to show you this feature in a couple other places today, so you'll see how important it is to the program. I'm going to move to light fixtures next. The fixture part of the program has a couple things that make it unique. One is that it requires a unique designation on every fixture. So typically that's a letter or a number or a combination of letters and numbers that come from the fixture schedule. The other thing to keep in mind here is that the program doesn't put pricing in for the light fixtures. Same thing when you do switchgear, same thing when you do a number of the other sort of specialty items that you need to get quotes from your supplier on. Now, it's going to remind you at the end. It'll prompt you if there's anything that you need to get a quote on. There are some reports we can run to tell us what we need to get a quote on. So I'm just going to build this one from scratch. I'm going to go down the screen kind of one line at a time. When I go to description here, I'm going to open up the folder for the LEDs, go to the recessed, and there's a 2x4 LED lay-in. Now, I don't normally put the manufacturing catalog number in because typically there's a way to do it electronically. Either send the supplier that you're going to get quotes from a copy of that fixture schedule from the drawings, send them the page from the drawings, even send them a picture of the fixture schedule. But if you want to do it manually, you can type it in. You'll notice I hit the letter L on the keyboard and it came down to lighted layer, and then I'm going to double click on Lithonia. Just going to make up a catalog number. With the LEDs, we can typically skip the lamps. We're going to come down here to accessories per fixture. So if I want to put in a fixture whip with every one of these fixtures, you just hit select items, go to fixture whips. You've got a variety of different ones, but we're just going to go with a basic 6 foot of 12-2 MC cable, and that would be one per fixture. Now I can also put in a J box, a junction box. I'm going to do the basic 4 square box and a blank cover. I'm going to put in a half a box. That way I'll get one box every 2 fixtures. On the quantity, we're going to put in 60 and hit right below it on F2 takeoff. So that's how you build a new fixture from scratch. And I'm going to show you a couple of shortcuts. They're real easy, and they're something you'll probably be able to use on every job, small jobs, large jobs, anything in between. So the next fixture designation is A-EM because it's another 2x4 lamp, but it's an LED. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the previous fixture by hitting the little down arrow here, clicking on A, and you see it makes a copy of it and brings all the information in. So I might want to do a little bit of editing in the catalog number, and I might want to even put a note here. I like this field for notes because when I generate the report that I'm going to send out to my supplier, those notes will be here. I'm going to leave the accessories the same. I'm going to put a quantity of 12 and hit takeoff. So you can see the copy feature really saves several steps there. Again, you'll find that that's something you can use on every job. Now the other shortcut is even a better one. You always start with the designation. Now if this is a common fixture like an exit light, instead of building it or copying one, we're going to go to Saved Assemblies. And right here is an exit fixture for a T-bar ceiling. And that, with that one selection, brings in the fixture up at the top. Down here under accessories, I get an assembly for a box and a plaster ring and a T-bar bracket. I am going to add a fixture whip here, so I'm going to hit select items, fixture whips. We'll do the same thing. And then for the quantity here, I'm going to put in 10. So either build them from scratch, use the copy feature, or use the saved assemblies. Now if I need to put in another 10 of the type A fixture, I can either type it in on this first line, or I can just hit the drop down and click on type A. I'm going to add 10 here, and that's going to add 10, make a new entry on the audit trail. But at any point in time, if I run a report, it'll consolidate things. So you see that was entry number 11 down here. If I scroll back up a ways, entry number 8 was the first 60 fixtures. So the report button is over here in the top right corner, kind of hiding a little bit. You hit report, and you hit OK. So this is really pretty much all your supplier needs to give you a quote. If you didn't put the manufacturing catalog number in, you'd want to send them a copy of the schedule. But it's got the job name, it's got your phone number, it's got your company name. It's even got a date stamp. Now that sometimes is a critical thing because the date and time stamp, you know, if you did have to print this report more than once because you made changes, you want to make sure that they get the most recent, the latest copy of it. This print button up at the top here will print a hard copy. The save button will automatically save it as a PDF file. So that way you can send that report or any report as an attachment to an email. Okay, so there's a couple of the counting modules, light fixtures and device assemblies. We're going to go do some wiring now. So up at the top, we're going to wire and conduit takeoff. And we're going to start with the cable takeoff. Of these 5 modules on the left, this is probably the most basic. Taking off MC cable is pretty straightforward. The program even fills in the most common type, aluminum clad, aluminum jacket, the most common size. We can just go straight down here and make some entries with the quantities. I'm going to put in 4,000 feet. And to the right, for the number of runs, I'm going to put in 200. So a run is when you go from point to point. could be from J-box to J-box. It could be from fixture to fixture. It could be from J-box back to the panel. A run is going to give you 2 connectors. Every run gives you 2 connectors. Same thing when you do conduit. Every run is going to give you 2 connectors for the conduit type that you're working with. Now you see I didn't get the right quantity there. We'll go ahead and hit F2 takeoff. So let's say I want to do 12-3. Just use this little drop down arrow to change it to 3 conductor. Come down here to the length and put in 1,500 feet. 75 runs. So 75 runs that totals 1,500 feet, and hit takeoff. So what all these things have in common in this module is these are all wiring options that you would pick when you're not pulling the wire separately through the conduit. So it includes different types of MC cable. It includes low voltage like Cat 5e and Cat 6. Down here a little bit further you'll see is coax. You've got SO cord. You've got fire alarm, this FPLR cable. And you could add to this list. You'll see luminary cable is here. That's the MC cable that has the 2 extra 16 gauge wires built in for low voltage for dimming, lighting controls. Okay, so let's go now to branch circuits. Now the screen's going to get a little busier. That's okay, because we're still working with the same concepts. Length, the number of runs. But now with the conduit, we have all the different sizes and types of conduit. Everything from EMT to PVC coated. We're going to leave it on 1/2-inch EMT, and we're going to leave it on 3 number 12s. Again, you got a whole large variety of wire types. So I'm going to leave it on number 12 stranded. Going to come down here to overall length and put in 1,200 feet and 60 runs. So 60 runs of 1/2-inch EMT that totals 1,200 feet. We don't enter elbows on 1/2-inch or 3/4-inch EMT because it assumes that the electricians are going to bend the field in the pipe. That's already factored in. Starting at 1 inch on EMT, you could pick either field bends or factory elbows. So that varies with the type of conduit. So the default here that it's picking up is your set screw steel couplings, 1 every 10 feet. It's going to give us a 1-hole strap for every 8 feet of pipe. And then it's going to give us a set screw steel connector, 2 connectors per run. Now the other thing it does, I'm going to go ahead and hit takeoff here, is it gives you some additional wire. We call it makeup wire. If you look down here in the audit trail, the length of the wire came out at 3,780 feet because we had 3 wires, 1,200 feet of pipe. That's 3,600 feet of wire, and it adds 5% for makeup automatically. It's going to do that with number 10 and smaller, and then starting at number 8, it's going to prompt you to put the makeup in feet. So we'll do an example of that in a minute. Before we do that, let's do another selection here with 3/4-inch, but 7 number 12s. So if I'm doing home runs for 3 circuits, this is how I would probably set it up. If we've got 10 home runs at an average of 50 feet apiece, we would put in 500 feet, 10 times 50. We put in 10 runs. We could still ignore the elbows because it's 3/4-inch EMT, but I'm going to pick a different support. Instead of the 1-hole strap, I'm going to go to the beam clamp of the conduit hanger because typically you run most of your home runs overhead when you're doing EMT. So we'll hit takeoff. So let's use this last example as an opportunity to show you how to edit something that's already been put into the takeoff. So let's say I want to change that to 600 feet. It's not a matter of just changing that 500 feet of pipe. It needs to recalculate the fittings and wire. So the first thing you do is to open up the audit trail down here where I'm moving my mouse by double-clicking anywhere down there. And then you single-click on any line from the entry you want to change. It could be the first entry or anywhere between the top and bottom of the audit trail. So from here, you're going to hit Edit to Source. That takes you back to the source, the screen where you made the entry. So we're just going to change that to 600 feet. And then when you hit Save Changes, it recalculates the fittings and wire, and you're done. Now, if you do want to change just one line, let's say I want 100 of these beam clamps instead of 75, that's where you either double-click or hit Edit. And then it lets you revise just the one item. So I'm going to change this to 100 up here in the top right, hit OK. Now you'll notice it turned that entire entry blue because you basically changed the assembly. You overrode what the program would normally calculate for that assembly. So it's just a way of kind of drawing your attention to it, tell you that you went off on your own there a little bit. Now to go right back where we left off, we're going to go to branch circuits. So we're going to make this just a little more challenging. We're going to change the conduit size to 1 inch, and we're also going to change the type of conduit to GRC. So for the number of wires, we're going to change it to 3. And we're going to put in 3 number 6s and 1 number 10. So let's say I've got 180 feet and 2 runs. So it doesn't matter whether it's 2 90-foot runs or a 100-foot run, an 80-foot run, anything that totals up to 180 for 2 runs, that's the way you enter it. Now for rigid conduit, we can put in elbows at any size. We'll put in 2. And let's say we're running this exposed on the roof. We're going to pick a different support. You've got the 1-inch unistrut strap with the rubber block and channel here. Now, to pick up additional fittings, like with rigid conduit, you often need things like condulettes and bushings and other materials. We're going to go to Other Items and hit Select Items. There's a whole folder here for metallic fittings and elbows. Going to come down here to GRC, IMC fittings and condulettes, and we're going to go to LBs and put in 2. You got a wide variety of fittings here. For now, we're going to close and hit F2 takeoff. So it's prompting me for the makeup wire because I've got this number 6 up here. And what you put in is the total for both ends. So if you want 5 feet at each end or 6 feet and 4 feet at each end, it would be a total of 10 here. Now back to shortcuts on this screen. If I want to go back to something more routine like 1/2 inch EMT with number 12 wire, instead of changing all these drop-down menus, you just come up here to Saved Assemblies, double-click on the first folder there. There's 1/2 inch with 3/12s, and we're going to put in 800 feet, 40 runs, and hit takeoff. So everything we've entered up to this point, we've done the wiring separate from the devices or the fixtures. Now, in my mind, that's kind of old school. That's the way I was taught to do it. You'd put in your fixtures, you put in your devices, and then you did the wiring, you measured it separately. But in the interest of time, and I'd even argue in the interest of accuracy, I think you can do a lot of your branch wiring takeoff with the device. So we have a module for that under here for fixtures and devices called Quick Branch. So it's all the same assemblies we started with, but up at the top here now, I could pick an assembly for the wiring up here in the top right. So if I'm going to take off some devices with MC cable, I just click on Cable. I'm going to just pick 12.2, and I'm going to leave it at 20 feet. But if you want to use 15 feet, 12 feet, 22 feet, whatever number you like here, if you've got higher ceilings, you can always bump that number up. So now we just go to Receptacles, Flush and Wood or Metal Stud, go to Duplex, come down here to 20 amp spec grade and a plastic plate. Same assembly we started with. I'm going to put 25 more of them in and hit takeoff. So in addition to the 25 receptacle assemblies, I'm also getting the wiring for them at 20 feet apiece. If I want to do the same thing with a GFI, just go back into the GFI folder, 20 amp spec grade, I'll put in 5 more of those. So again, I think this is a more efficient way to do it. In a lot of cases, it's more accurate than scaling it off the drawings, because do they ever install it the way that it's shown in the drawings, or should they even install it the way it's on the drawings? I think you're better off using a good average here, for especially for jobs if you're doing, offices, retail, schools, even medical buildings and that kind of thing. I think for the most part, you can do the wiring on a per device basis, not including the home runs. That's a whole separate thing. Okay. The last part of the takeoff I want to show you, again, jump in if you have any questions, is what we call other takeoff down here at the bottom. These first 3 options on the left are things you may use on every job. Miscellaneous takeoff is just that, taking off miscellaneous random items from the database. It could be some additional pipes, some fittings, some wires, even wire nuts. Now, the database here has over 10,000 items, probably more than double that if you have the Pro version. So sometimes finding things here is a challenge. Really good simple example here is a pull box. Like let's say I'm looking for a 12 by 12 by 6 NEMA 3R rain tight pull box. So not knowing what folder to find those in, you're always going to have a search button on the right here. And just keep it simple. Type in 1 or 2 words, pull box. Hit search. Now we're going to drill down into that category it found up here at the top because there's more selections. Here's NEMA 3R 6 inches deep. And there's a 12 by 12 by 6. We're going to put in 2 of those. Notice that it shows you the pathway to get to this list. It's under miscellaneous items, screw cover hinge pull boxes, screw cover NEMA 3R 6 inches deep. When you back up out of here, it brings you back right through those steps. Now, if we can't find an item in the database, there's 2 ways to put temporary items in. Kind of depends on the situation. This quick temp is just that, for putting in temporary items as quickly as possible, because all you have to fill in here is the description. Just going to make up a dummy item, a widget, and the quantity. Now, by leaving the price and labor checked as open, it'll flag this item so that when I run the reports, it's going to flag it. It's going to prompt me to put in a price and a labor unit. So we can move on. That's the whole thing with temporary items. It gives you the quick, easy way to move on without having to stop and make a note, having to make a phone call. You can put all that off until you're done with the takeoff. Now, the other temporary option is where you go to pull items out of Epic, which gives you access to almost 2 million more items. So when you hit the add button on the right here, until you're adding an item, you'll have an import button down at the bottom. That's going to link you right into Epic. Now, we do a whole separate webinar on Epic, but let's say I've got a specific time clock I'm looking for. I always like time clocks as a good example here, the kind of thing you'd never want to guess at, because they could be $30 or $300 or even a lot more. So I'm looking for an Intermatic time clock. Hitting the blue folder with the M, go into I for Intermatic, and double-clicking on Intermatic. Now down at the bottom here, you can see there's over 900 items here. I don't want to scroll through this. The sidebar in Epic has an option to look up by catalog number. So as I start typing in the catalog number, you'll notice this list gets shorter every time I add a character. Right now we're down to 87. I'm going to add 1 more. And now we're down to less than half a screen of items. That's pretty typical when you look up by catalog number. You only need the first 3 or 4 characters usually to narrow it down to where you can make a selection. Now, let's say I want to see a cut sheet. I want to see a picture of this item, this next to last one here. When you click on this red Y here, it's going to bring me to that page in that manufacturer's catalog. It's not going to their website. It's going to our server where we've got about 200 catalogs that we keep updated. So you can use these obviously for submittals. You can print them. You can save them as PDF files. You can zoom in if you want to see a little more of the details, the specifications. A lot of the time for an estimator, the most important thing to figure out what they're going to need to enter for labor is just to get a good picture, a good look at the item. Okay, so I'm going to close my catalog for now. Now to export the item I've got highlighted, the toolbar on the top, the third one in from the right, takes that item, that information back into EBM. You'll see it puts the pricing in. Excuse me, we'll talk about the trade price and the target price in just a minute. Now it doesn't fill in labor columns. We'll talk about those in a minute, but it does flag them as open, so it's not going to let you forget it to do it later if you don't do it now. When you hit OK, it prompts you for the quantity. We'll just leave it at 1. So temporary items can be things that you make up on the fly, like the quick temp item, the widget, or they can be things that you pull out of Epic. So when we go down to reports, the 2 key reports are going to be the second and third options here, the job extension and then the job totals. Job extension is simply going to multiply the quantity of each item by the price of material and the amount of labor. So you've got choices on how to price the material and how to enter what labor units to use on the material. So the 2 basic options here are the target price and the trade price. You could also incorporate your local suppliers pricing. That's a whole nother part of another webinar. But the target price from Epic is the average national price that we establish by monitoring suppliers all over the country. Now, I know to some extent that prices are regional, not as much as you think, and they're definitely different from supplier to supplier, but this gives you a good benchmark. Typically, the target price has a little bit of cushion in it. The other price that Epic gives us is the trade price. Now, you would probably never use that for bidding unless maybe you didn't have any competition. You definitely might use it on a change order. We're going to leave it on target. And then for labor, we're trying to address the degree of difficulty. Column 2 is our middle difficulty. Column 1 is the lowest, so it will give you the lowest number of hours. Column 3 is the highest, so if you've got a difficult job, or again, if you're doing a change order, go to column 3. Now, we left 3 columns open, so you can develop those on your own based on ours or based on your own numbers. For now, we're just going to hit extension spreadsheet. Widgets are up to about $25 a piece. That's before they put a tariff on them. And labor, we're going to put a half an hour, 30 minutes. And then the time clock, we're going to go an hour and a half. I wonder what percentage of electrical materials are made in China. I have no clue. Okay. Won't get off the topic there too far. Half-inch EMT, you'll see where I'm pointing. We've got 2,000 feet. We've got a price of $43.62 per 100. That extends out to 872. We've got 2.5 hours of labor per 100, which extends out to 50 hours. So the reason this report is in a spreadsheet format is that you can do your final editing here. You can change the quantity, you can change the price, you can change the labor unit. You can even delete things. If I want to change that price on half-inch EMT, now even though I know there's a little bit of cushion there, maybe I'm worried about the price is going to go up. I'm going to bump it up to $46. Going to hit save. And you'll see it instantly changes the price there. And that's all there is to making changes here. Double click on the line you want to change, make the change, hit save, and then move on to another item. Now when you're done here, you notice I scroll all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to hit the refresh button. That'll refresh the totals. So that number is going to drop just a little bit. I went up, sorry, because I raised the price. And this number to the right, the 540, that's hours of labor. So this is dollars of material, 10,739. And now that price does not include sales tax. It does not include the quotes. And the 540 is hours of labor. So to print this or even to save it as a PDF, you go to Preview Report. And again, from here, you can print it with the little printer icon or save it with the icon here to save it as a PDF file. So our final report is job totals. So it's going to take those totals for material and labor into a final summary. Some people call it a recap. It reminds us that we haven't put the fixture quote in, so we'll just hit OK there. So there's our non-quoted material, that 10,739. To put your quotes in, you just click on quotes. If you get an itemized quote, you can use the top part of the screen like a little spreadsheet and plug in the prices on each fixture. Typically, you're going to get a lump sum quote on fixtures, so we'll just put that in right here under lump sum quotes. Going to hit OK. So there's our non-quoted and quoted material. Sales tax is added automatically, but you can adjust it if you need to. There's the hours, the 540.44 that came from the job extension. The 3105 was one of the first things we looked at in the setup, the composite rate for labor. Again, at this point, I could easily change it to a different crew, like a prevailing wage crew. I'm just going to leave it where it is and hit OK. Non-productive labor is for anything you need to add in addition to the normal 8 hours a day that the electrician spends working with their tools. Now, it does include what I call normal non-productive time. Doesn't include any additional driving time. Normal non-productive time would be just the normal material handling, normal setup time, normal cleanup time. If you need to add above that, this is where you do it. Let's say this job is outside of my normal area and I want to add some driving time. I can put that in at the same hourly rate and hit OK. You could also put in a project manager. Some people include that in their job costs. Some people include it in their overhead. Direct job expenses would be things like equipment rentals, permits, storage, anything that you need to add to the additional cost. I'm going to put in some money for a permit. I'm going to come all the way down here. Now, if you need to add something, this is where you can put in things like temporary lighting, temporary power. I'm going to put in some money for your fuel. And just come here to the total and put in $300 for that. These three categories are all pretty similar. The tools are just more categories of different types of tools and miscellaneous costs. Subcontracts, let's say we're going to sub out the fire alarm. Again, you just go to the total and hit OK. So now we've got what we call prime cost. It's $50,000, $50,151. That's just our break-even number. That's what it's going to cost us out of pocket just to purchase the materials for the job, pay the employees, any other direct costs, equipment rentals, permits, etc. So overhead is typically what we need just to cover the cost of running the business. We're going to put in 12% here. People ask me what's a typical number here. I see numbers as low as 8 to 10. I see numbers as high as 25 to 30. Just depends on the job, depends on the company, especially with profit. Now that's really partly an indication of, how much you think you can make or how much you want to make on the job. I'll put in 10%. So now by adding overhead and profit, we're up to $61,787. The report I would print here, again, I would print a hard copy in addition to saving as in a PDF. When you go to print details, say yes, you want to include the fixture quote details in this case. Now, on my laptop screen here, I can only see about half of a page. That's why I'm scrolling up and down. On a, little bit bigger monitor, like a 24-inch even, you'll probably be able to see the whole report here page by page. These little hands here go forward one page at a time or backwards. And again, you can print a hard copy with a little printer icon, or you can use the save button to automatically save it as a PDF file. Okay. I think that's going to wrap it up here today. I want to thank everybody for attending the webinar.